Moving down to number 5 on the evidence list, at the current 450 million ton annual salt flow rate from rivers into oceans, we'd expect the sea salinity level to be much higher than the present 3.5% if Earth really formed 4.6 billion years ago. While contradictory to evolutionary theory, this salinity percentage fits well within the expectations of biblical creationists. Evidence number 6 involves the fact that approximately 500 million tons of sediment are deposited in the Gulf of Mexico by the Mississippi River every year. This is a huge problem for evolutionists, for if the Mississippi River is really as old as they claim it is, then the entire Gulf of Mexico would have completely filled long ago. Yet this is obviously not the case. Also, if the oceans are actually several billion years old, then significantly more sediment would lay on their floor since, according to the average rate from a dozen different studies, 24.108 billion tons of soil flow into them every year. In fact, based on scientific research, all the world's continents would be eroded to sea level within just 9.6 million years, which is clearly incompatible with a 4.6 billion year evolutionary timescale for Earth. In contrast, the currently existing average 1,312 feet of ocean floor sediment is much more consistent with a planet only several thousand years old. Studies have also shown that the combined ash deposits of all the world's volcanoes is about 1 cubic mile per year, and we know volcanic activity was greater in the past. If the continents are really 2.5 billion years old, in accordance with evolutionary theory, then using this conservative uniformitarian volcanic ash production rate over that time period means the entire Earth, including the oceans, would have been covered to a depth of 12.2 miles. Since this clearly isn't the case, we can conclude Earth and the continents are not really as old as evolutionists claim, while a planet only a few thousand years old makes sense in light of the volcanic data and case of geologic layers across the world. Tidal friction from the moon is slowing our planet's rotation and causes the length of an Earth day to increase 0.0002 seconds per century, which means the Earth is losing angular momentum. According to the conservation of angular momentum law, our planet's slowly decreasing angular momentum must be offset by the moon, which causes the moon to recede from the Earth about 1.5 inches per year, and that rate would have been greater in the past when the moon was near. The moon simply cannot have been closer than 11,500 miles to the Earth, which is called the Roche limit, or due to Earth's tidal and gravitational influences, the moon would have literally shattered, according to scientists, and our planet would have been negatively affected also. However, to be overly generous to evolutionists, if it was allowable for the Earth and moon to physically touch and we ignore the fact that the moon's recession rate would have been greater in the past, it would have taken only 1.37 billion years for our planet and moon to collide, which directly conflicts with evolutionists' belief that Earth and the moon are more than 4 billion years old. In contrast to the clearly incorrect evolutionary dating scheme, the present distance of Earth from the moon is consistent with the biblical timescale and known physical forces. Another problem for evolutionists is the fact that stars within our Milky Way galaxy rotate way too fast for it to be 10 billion years old, as predicted by evolutionary theory. Evolutionists have recognized this winding up dilemma for nearly 50 years, but have still failed to offer a satisfactory explanation. They also cannot explain the fact that more than 30 moons and at least 2 planets in our solar system rotate backwards, while Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune actually have moons orbiting in both directions. Also, although evolutionary theory claims comets should be several billion years old, they have proven to typically be only several thousand years old, which is compatible with the biblical timeline. Comets would have dissolved in space long before billions of years elapsed, and therefore would no longer exist if the theory was true, yet they still do. There is also absolutely no evidence for the presence of a so-called Oort cloud full of comets. Scientific measurements have shown that Earth's magnetic field loses half its energy every 1,454 years, which means our planet's maximum age is 20,000 years, and the likelihood of magnetic reversals during the flood is a good reason to believe it is even younger. Evolutionists have desperately tried to solve this vexing problem, but have been unable to overcome the fact that our finite magnetic field is degrading far too rapidly for Earth to be 4.6 billion years old. In contrast, the existing strength of this magnetic field fits easily within the creationist model. The exceptional density of Mercury's inner core is not consistent with evolutionary theories related to planetary formation, but corresponds well with the expectations of creationists. Also, the still extremely powerful magnetic field of Jupiter would not exist if the planet was really several billion years old, as evolutionists believe, The strong magnetic fields of Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune present similar problems for evolutionary theory. Further, the incredibly fragile rings of Saturn should have been pulverized within less than 10,000 years, according to evolutionists, yet they endure in magnificent detail, which perfectly complies with the Bible's universal timeline. Additionally, the persistent geologic activity of Uranus' small moon is unexplainable by evolutionary theory, which predicts an age of several billion years, but is consistent with the Bible-based model. Also, the presence of exceedingly strong, heat-driven winds surrounding sun-starved Neptune is not compatible with an evolutionary age of several billion years. While evolutionists claim that Neptune should now be a cold planet since it emits 2.7 times the energy received from the sun, the existence of heat is not surprising to biblical creationists. Similarly, measurements have shown that Jupiter loses twice the amount of heat it receives from the sun, so it too should be a cold planet, but it's not, so it cannot be billions of years old, as evolutionists believe. There are virtually no signs of soil formation, erosion, or biological activity at or just below the surface of geologic strata layers, which supposedly accumulated individually over several million years until the next layer began to form. Soil formation, erosion, and biological activity would be obvious if several million years really elapsed between the creation of individual layers. The observable evidence clearly supports rapid strata formation in accordance with the biblical worldview. Supernova star explosions have been observed to occur, on average, once every 30 years, and only 205 supernova remnants exist, which is very consistent with a slightly more than 6,000-year biblical timeline. It's completely unreasonable to believe with evolutionists that A. Wood frogs slowly evolved the ability to be literally frozen alive during winter, and B. Woodpeckers slowly evolved cushioned skulls over several million years before literally bashing their brains out against trees. It's also illogical to claim C. Giraffes slowly evolved a protective blood vessel netting, which actually protects their brains from being blown apart by the gravitational force of flowing blood every time they bend over for a drink. And D. The extremely complex human and other creatures' reproductive systems slowly evolved one step at a time without precluding successful reproduction. These and many other intricate biological systems and abilities had to be created quickly and completely, or they wouldn't successfully operate and all organisms would have died. I've just offered 20 more reasons to believe the Earth is young, but in reality there are hundreds of additional physical processes that limit our planet's age to well below the billions of years proclaimed and required by evolutionary theory.